What's happening to the far right in this country? The extreme right, who used to be regarded as a pretty serious threat. Well, clearly, we're at greater risk from Islamic terrorism, but the far right haven't gone away. The government's counter-radicalisation programme, PREVENT, says a third of the cases referred to it include people who are suspected of having extreme right-wing views that could turn into violence. We heard earlier in this programme from a man who's been receiving counselling through PREVENT's mentoring scheme. Well, I'm joined in the studio now by Dr. Paul Stocker, who's the research associate in fascist studies at Teesside University. He's written a book called English Uprising. And when you talk about English Uprising, what do you mean?
Well, beginning with the Brexit vote, that was very much an expression of political Englishness. As we know, England voted to leave outright the European Union, whereas Scotland and Northern Ireland did not. And if you look at many of the opinion polls taken after, a lot of the people who voted to leave stated that they identified themselves much more as English than they did British.
Right, but this doesn't make them extremists, obviously.
Of course not. No, no, and that's the sort of English aspect to it isn't the point I'm trying to make with the book. It's really more about how ideas of the far right, such as these radical critiques of immigration, multiculturalism, even nationalism at times, were very present in the run-up to the Brexit vote and indeed have becoming much more mainstream for years.
But we have shown, the population of this country have shown that we don't approve of the far right. We don't put them in Parliament. We don't have any, they have no clear, strong democratic voice.
Certainly, yeah. The far right has been electorally insignificant for pretty much its entire existence since the early 1920s.
You've got to go back to Mosley or something, haven't you?
Yeah, you can look at these small phases such as the National Front in the 1970s, the BNP in the first decade of this century, for brief periods of electoral success, but they were very fleeting. But I do think whilst the parties have been unsuccessful, a lot of their ideas have become a bit more mainstream, co-opted by the sort of some of the more hysterical media stories in the tabloid press. They may have been taken on by UKIP to a certain extent. And so I don't think they have failed in a complete sense. They have failed electorally, whereas some of their ideas may have succeeded.
And they're not a physical threat to us.
Well, that's the big issue. Obviously, we saw last month a case of a very violent act outside Finsbury Park Mosque. There are instances of far-right terrorism, and this isn't a new thing. With David Copeland, the nail bomber in 1999, this isn't a new threat, and indeed the government's PREVENT strategy has been monitoring the threat.
And they do tend to be one-offs, don't they? At least that appears to be the case.
They do tend to be one-offs, yeah, and of course it's very difficult to predict because of many of them, or nearly all of them, are so-called lone actor terrorists. They act within a sort of loose network, but they tend to be self-directed, so it's very difficult to monitor, very difficult to predict who is most at risk, but they do happen.
Paul Stocker, thanks very much. And tomorrow we're going to be reporting on the challenge in schools of countering extremism, whether it's inspired by militant Islamists or by far-right groups.
Time now, 14 minutes to 9. We were celebrating the